this is your journey, and this is the journey that showed up for you when your wife diagnosed with cancer, had to go through all of the treatments and all the things. So, is that where you started the journey, or where did you start your journey? Like, how did you find yourself here, being that coach, being that public speaker? Where, and I know that, and and I'm going to ask you this question. I heard what you said. You know, you got a message from God, and what does a message from God sound like? Is it a voice from the ceiling? Is it a meditation that just comes really clear? Tell me, because I've heard the phrase before, and God just told me. Give me a description of God telling you something. Can you describe it, Daniel?
For me, I was getting dressed to go for an interview. My wife had been home already for a couple of months, recovering from her surgery. And as I was going to my tie rack, I found this old email from an old counselor because there's always a preparation stage for our future 5, 10 years ahead of us. We don't realize it, but our life 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is preparing us for the day. And when I found this email, at the time I was running a Chevrolet dealership. I still wear my Chevrolet ring, and I would go give out these awards to the youth. One day I go to give out an award. I'm like, here you go, cheese. I'm done. The principal goes, can you say some words to the students? I'm like, oh no, I don't do that. I just take pictures. I just right. I didn't say it in that way, but she goes, it'd be awesome if you could say something. I said, ma'am, forgive me, but I didn't prepare anything. I would rather be prepared. So I go sit down and I can feel it in my heart. So this is the voice of God. My intuition speaks to me. Daniel, you just spoke on attitude at work, the dealership. Talk about attitude. I said, ma'am, I can speak on attitude for 10 minutes. Was that's okay with you? She was like, yeah, sure. 30 minutes later, I have 300 students yelling and screaming, I'm a winner. I'm a champion. I love myself. I believe in myself. And it was crazy energy. 2 weeks later, I get this email that I found 5 years later in my tie bin as I'm reading it. Who is this car guy? They sent it to the counselor. It was one of the parents. Who is this car guy that came and spoke to our students? My son is running around the house, yelling and screaming, looking in the mirror, saying, I love myself. I believe in myself. I'm like, oh crap, what did I do? Tell him I said, thank you. EJ has never been happier. He puts on the Chevrolet cap and he says, I love you. And I was like, wow, I just started crying when I read that. I didn't cry the first time I read it 5 years ago, but at that season of my life, I said, wow. When I read that, that's when I felt the prompting of God's voice just say, I want you to be a motivational speaker. Because I was prepared for that moment. And many times we undermine, going back to what I said about, right? 90% of us, most of us, we undervalue ourselves. Since we undervalue ourselves, we undermine the things we do. We think everybody's doing it. And the truth is, not everybody's doing what we're doing. We assume they are, but they're not.
Mhm. It's interesting in that you say that. I know when I launched the Everyday Millionaire podcast on the audio side of it 7 years ago, it was like, do I really want to do this? And will I succeed? And who the hell am I in terms of? And then I realized, well, the podcast isn't about me. It's about my guests. It's about sharing and having and opening the door to people like yourself who are coming on just, how I often say, seemingly ordinary, having achieved extraordinary. And I've had some amazing, amazing guests that share on their journey and share what they do in business and how they got there and all the rest of it. But I never thought, so literally as we sit here today, and then my wife and I, Stephanie, launched our Mindset Matters part of that podcast year and a half ago or so. And with no kind of, we're just going, okay, well, let's just do a 30-minute thing on mindset, because we know that it is, lots of people go, just tell me how, tell me how, tell me how. And it isn't, show me how, tell me the math, give me an Excel spreadsheet, tell me the steps to take to make $1 million. And we know, and that so much of that is actually pretty straightforward. The challenge we face is the mental game, and how do we look after ourselves? How do we step into that growth mindset versus a fixed mindset? Or how do we set ourselves up mentally to prepare for the steps that we have to take as entrepreneurs, because we really speak from an entrepreneurial space. That's not to say that we don't have some great listeners who have got great careers and clients and all the rest of it. Long story short, that literally tens of thousands of listeners later, like hundreds of thousands, actually, this many later, I look at it and I go, who would have thought that that would be that? But it's to your point. We think everybody knows this stuff, and actually, no, they know it. They just don't know that they know it, and they need to hear conversations like this to spark that. Oh, you know something? That's me. That's where I'm in my way. That's where I'm stuck. You're no different than me. You read, you listen to stuff, and it's inspirational, it's motivational. You're listening to other professionals in the space that going, oh yeah, you know something? I'm still doing that shit. I got to work through it. Like, it is a funny journey that we go on to be in the space that we play in, right? And it's just an interesting kind of view of the world that we take on as well. I want to go back, and I don't want to step over the conversation a little bit more. Thanks for sharing me with us on that conversation around with God. Like, I've heard that many times, and because I meditate, I hear and I get different messages, and they show up in this kind of weird way, and I just know, oh, that's the topic I got to hit on, or that's the direction I got to go. But you also have to take time to meditate, by the way. Just a little putting it out there.
Yeah, you need to.
And I'm guilty of not being consistent with it. But I do know that I get to a point where I go, no, I've got to get back to doing some meditation. I've got to get back to doing what looks after me. And that takes discipline as well, because it's easy to be distracted in a busy life when you want to achieve a lot of stuff. And when you're fighting fires as an entrepreneur, for example. But I'm going to go back a little bit here on this conversation. And I think these messages are so important. You come from the experience of your wife having breast cancer. Give me a little bit of background on that. How did that impact you, your family? Certainly, you know, you dealt with it as a couple. Is there any insights that you would give to listeners in terms of don't put it up? And let me give you a little backstory on that. A good friend of mine, professional hockey player, was the captain of Toronto Maple Leafs. His wife passed away from colon cancer. And, you know, he likes to get the message out there that, you know, listen, you get to that certain age, that 40, 50-year-old, you know, you need to go for that test, whatever that test might be for you. And I really relate to it. I have lost two sisters to colon cancer. I myself dealt with some things, not with colon cancer because I was preemptive. But the point is this. There's a message in there that, you know, for me, which is don't ignore. And especially when it comes to colon cancer, it is the most curable cancer there is, I think. And you shouldn't, you can detect it before it happens. In other words, get in front of it and you're not dealing with it. That's the whole point of that. So that's a message I can give to somebody. When you think about breast cancer, what you and your wife went through, is there a message there? Is there a lesson learned in all of that, Daniel, that you would share?
Well, the thing is that the check engine light was on in our lives for many years. We ignored that check engine light on. And you can't ignore that light, because what happens when you ignore that light, next thing you know, if you ignore the light of your engine in your car, it's going to burn out. And I didn't realize that it was me that needed to change. It was me. When it was my wife that got diagnosed, it forced me to slow down because the signs were there. I was just ignoring it. And the thing is we had to tear my wife's body down. She had a double mastectomy. Our lives were literally broken down as a foundation to build us back up. And the mistake that we make as entrepreneurs, as business owners, is that we want to build on top of cracked foundation, and it doesn't work that way. We learned that in during COVID. Why did all these businesses go out of business? Because they had the wrong foundation. They didn't have the proper foundation, and all the cracks, all the fractures were exposed in these businesses and these lives. And look, they're not in existence anymore. So the lesson for people is to really slow down and pay attention to their check engine light that's on your life.
I love that check engine light. I often use a phrase, which is, you know, I'll reword it. Doesn't matter what wording you use, but there's a you know there's a saying that is the universe or God, whatever you want to refer to
Yes.
it. They will say, you know, the universe will send you messages, or God will send you messages. But my friend used to say, but don't worry, Patrick, if you don't hear them, they will turn up the volume. And eventually you will hear them. And it's like, oh my gosh, right? It was such a powerful message for me. So it's like, God whispers, but don't worry if you don't hear it. It'll turn up the volume. You just don't want to hear the volume, right? Like you don't want to let it get to that point. In other words, listen to the whispers. And whether you call it God or Buddha or the universe or whatever you want to phrase it, we all are all part of consciousness, and those messages are there. We are children of the universe, and those messages are there. And the check engine light is so freaking good. I think I'll use that one. I haven't actually heard that one before. So thanks for sharing that insight.